Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you
Our
for having
difference
us.
makers. Yes. I think we do clap and do a fireworks noise, just at you being here. It's wonderful. Victoria Pendleton, I am going to start with you. So take us back a bit on all this. I mean, what an incredible CV and list of achievements. When did it all start? When and how did sport become a big part of your life?
I think when I realised I wasn't much good at anything else, really. No, I have always been brought up in a really sporty background, and my family's quite sporty, and I've got a twin brother, and anything he can do, I can do better, obviously. And I've just always been very competitive and enjoyed it and encouraged to sort of just go for it, which didn't make me a lot of friends at school, or find me any boyfriends, funny enough, because apparently beating boys isn't seen as that attractive. Who knew? But I've just always felt like it was one place that I could really express myself, was playing sport and really, I don't know, give it my all.
How do we get more young girls into sport and stop them dropping out? Because it's a problem when they get into the teenage years, statistically.
Well,
that's
the
bunking off PE period is
yeah, well,
quite literally period in some cases.
Yes.
That's where it gets
week,
difficult.
Every week, yeah. It's this weekend, I discovered how you get girls into sport. Basically, you get loads of powder paint. It really works. I couldn't believe it. I was at the Run and Die event that Clinique held, and I couldn't believe how many groups of young girls were out there running and walking around the 5K course, but having a really lovely time. And I was like, wow, if all it takes is a bit of powder paint, this is the way to go. Because it was fun. It was
making
relaxed.
it fun. Yeah.
It was fun. It was relaxed. There was music playing. People were dancing. There was a bit of a festival atmosphere afterwards. But they were participating out of choice and having a lovely time with their pals. I think it's how you kind of present the option of sport towards somebody. And I think women respond to different things to men. Making like, hey, we're going to have a head-to-head, two teams, one winners, one losing. You know, that doesn't appeal to the average 13-year-old girl. They're like, oh man, why would I want to do that? It doesn't make sense to me. Having fun, having a social experience with my pals, keeping fit, looking after myself, understanding why I'm doing it and the benefits, and enjoying it, that's what gets people doing stuff. Like, they've got to change the rules on how they do it. It's not one size fits all, is it?
You've now become a jockey. How did that change come about?
Well, I was looking for something to do. I love a challenge. I've realised very late in my life that I am at my best when I'm under immense physical and mental pressure.
So it's either that or a fire woman.
Well, yeah, I would actually do that. I totally would do that.
Be pretty good.
Basically, I just committed to it 100%. I started to work at a yard, just like everybody else on the yard. And we got there in the end. My trainer did say to me the other day, and I don't know if I should say this, he did say of all the people he's ever worked with as a work rider that I have the most balls. And I said, well, thank you. I quite like the idea of being a little bit courageous, because I think that's what you're trying to say. I think. But yeah, the coach I had, Yogi, did say that he realised very early on that I was very determined and very courageous. And since he said courageous, it's been my favourite word. I'll just say it a few more times. Courageous, courageous.
You are courageous.
Courageous. And then I was like, what is courage? And I was like, well, you don't have to earn it. You're not born with a certain amount of it, so it's not genetic. You don't have to deserve it. It's there if you want it. If everybody has a certain amount of courage within them, you just got to tap into it. And I was like, that is so cool. Courage. I think we should all have a bit more of it. Like, just wake up tomorrow and say, do you know what? I'm going to be more courageous today than I've ever been. Why not? I just love that word. I want to spread courage.
I feel more courageous already. Does anybody else?
Courage. Do it.
Excellent work. Thank you so much. Victoria Pendleton, everybody.
Thank you.
She is courageous. Our next guest is the wonderful Bryony Gordon.
How am I going to? This is embarrassing.
Bryony,
Can I start with my Tory?
I have to ask you about it because I know that you actually owe Victoria a very special debt.
Very special to me. You made a real difference to me, which is I was at the I covered the Olympics for work, and I watched you get gold in the the Kieran, and it was like. I was so excited, and I went home and had sex with my boyfriend, and I got pregnant, and I now have a 3-year-old. The Rio Olympics have a lot to work, a lot to live up to. But so I just wanted to say thanks.
Do we know if there was like an Olympic post 2012 baby boom? Like there must have been.
Yeah, people were like, yeah.
It was so amazing.
London
it was like the best 2 weeks.
London was very
I was gonna say
exciting.
the best section.
I can't really remember. I was drunk, but it was like really amazing 2 weeks. Well done.
It's a beautiful
Well
moment.
done.
I'm so glad that tonight has happened. Just for
Yes.
for that alone.
Thank you.
Bryony, so you're not backwards about coming forwards, obviously.
No,
you are frank and honest.
There's a thin line between courageous and stupid.
No.
1 in 4 of us will experience mental health issues this year. I don't know, has anyone in here, experienced mental health issues? Yeah, all of you, yeah. So 4 in 4 of us know someone who has experienced it. And I was like, I'm so sick of this kind of, you don't have to suffer in silence. And when I first had OCD when I was 12, I thought I was dying of AIDS. And I had no words, I didn't know what it was, I just thought I was dying. And when you give people words, you give them the kind of courage again, and people talk about it, and people suffer so needlessly in silence, and because the moment you talk about it, you give that thing less power. So yes, that's how I came to write about it. And then I sat down and I wrote another book called Mad Girl, which is basically I'd like to think of it as an upbeat book about depression, but it's sort of like it's my memoir of my mental illness, because I thought so it isn't a self-help book, because I can't help myself to anything, and I don't pretend that I'm an expert or I just have lots of experience of things. And what I wanted to do is I hope that by sharing my story, it might give people the kind of courage to share their own stories. And that's what I want. I want people to talk about it, shout about it. I always say my husband always says, oh, you're fucking writing about depression again. Only you can make such a song and dance about depression. And I say, that's exactly what you should do, make a song and dance of it, because then the more you make a song and dance of it, the more you shout of it, the more you scream at it, people can't ignore you, and, government can't ignore you, and, big employers can't ignore you.
Yeah. I move on now to Juno Dawson. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. So, Juno, as I understand it, you left your previous career in 2011. Is that right?
Yes, I was a primary school teacher.
Okay. How had you already started writing at that point?
I grew up in Bradford, in quite a skanky area, and I didn't think that people from skanky parts of Bradford could be writers. I thought you needed to go to Oxford or Cambridge or something, So I just never thought, and I was quite pragmatic, and I sort of thought, you need a proper job, and get yourself a trade. Mm-hmm. So I chipped off and became a primary school teacher instead. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, as someone connecting with young adult readers, and best-selling books all over the world, yeah. But it's such a kind of specific audience to reach out to. What is it, do you think, about your work that they like? What do you hear back from readers?
I mean, I'm really lucky. I think that they tend to say that, they think that... until I started my transition, the thing I got was, I don't understand you write such good teenage girls. And the thing is, because I was in delayed puberty, waiting to become a teenage girl. So I think there is just something, to me still, there is something so fascinating about change and about transitions of all sorts. And I always say to people that, my transition is quite notable, but who among us isn't transitioning? As we get older, as we go from relationship to relationship, as we become parents, It's all one massive transition. But I think at never any more time is transition more obvious than puberty. And there is something, all my books, both fiction and non-fiction, have been about transformation, and particularly, a character starts at the beginning of the book, something happens to them, and then they finish the book in a slightly different state.
Right, okay. I mean, and that's a fascinating parallel with the experience that, as you say, you've been going through. Did you realise quite early on that was, in psychologically, you had that connection to it? Or?
Not really. I mean, I was a bit of a Johnny-come-lately to the whole transitioning thing. At the moment, I'm working on my memoir as well, and so this has involved raking up a lot of sort of adolescent stuff. I mean, and this is going to sound so ridiculous, but as a teenager, I legitimately had no concept of a transgender person. It was the 90s, and we did have Ellen, and we had Will and Grace, but I didn't know what a transgender person was.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't know it was an option. And, had you asked 3-year-old me, will you take this X-Men serum that will magically turn you into a girl, I would have said yes in a heartbeat. I absolutely knew. But what I didn't know was that, somebody who gets called a little boy a lot can also be a woman as well. And so, thinking about difference makers, a lot of my difference makers was any trans person who has gone before me, kind of. And in particular, the people who are about my age. But the sad thing is, I was well into my 20s and had started my writing career, and this is getting so ridiculous, until I even met a trans woman.
Wow.
And so for me, it was people like Paris Lees, Munro Bergdorf, Andrea Petchich, people who were my age, and I sort of saw them and sort of thought, oh, look, they seem to be a bit like you, and they're telling you about when they were little as well and how they knew from very young age. And so, yeah, but I don't think it was time wasted, really. And, when I started my writing career, it never occurred to me to not write female characters, really. It just felt like sort of second nature, which, maybe figures now.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. I mean, how difficult do you think that it is to be a teenager today? You're connected with, writing for them and connecting with them on a daily basis. And obviously, as you say, I guess there are a lot of conversations, and I suppose in different ways we're kind of tackling some of them tonight, that it seems like the country is having, and that the world is having, that we haven't been ready for until this point.
Yeah.
And I think that can create an extremely kind of complicated landscape. Do you think it's easier to be a teenager now, or more difficult than it was when you were a kid?
I think, maybe every generation has said this forever, but I think it's harder than ever because of the way, we can never know what it was like to have broadband on our phones when we were 10. We can't even imagine it. I had a horrible time at school, but what was great about when I went home is I could be a completely different person. I walked through that front door, this was my space, nobody can touch me there. I'm the most popular person in this house, kind of. There were only 3 of us, but but whereas now, all that crap that I would have had at school would have just followed me straight home, and it would have gone up the stairs, it would have gone into my bedroom, it would have gone under my duvet, because, the first thing you do in the morning is kind of see what's happening in the world. And, I think, and what's sad for teenagers now is they don't know what it was like to not have that. They've been so switched on, that broadband has by and large now existed for all of a 15-year-old's life. So it's kind of, we were talking just earlier about Instagram, how now our lives are lived in a very different way, and the pressures it puts on you to look a certain way, and I think this goes for boys and girls. But yeah, I think the general vibe I have is that there's just no escape from it, and the problem is they don't even realise what they're into, kind of, because they've never known any different. And my heart goes out, because I don't think I would have coped with it very well at all.
I mean, you are out there as not just a writer, but also as an ambassador for Stonewall, the charity that works to support the LGBT community. When did you decide to kind of do that and to take that role on? And why did you decide to do it? Did you feel an obligation? You're talking about kind of difference makers in your life and connecting with these role models. Was it around that time, or?
Yeah, I mean, Stonewall came to me when I was still living as a man, and they said, we're always keen to have all sorts of different people, authors, lawyers, doctors, anybody whereby their sexuality or gender hasn't impacted on their success, because too often, and particularly coming through the 90s and the AIDS crisis, strangely enough, we got one narrative of being LGBT, and that was quite a sad, you're probably going to die narrative. And so I think Stonewall was very quick to sort of say, gosh, we have to fill schools and homes and the media, because it started off as a media pressure group. We've got to fill the media with positive role models, because otherwise kids are going to think they've got some sort of life sentence. And it really hasn't. And actually, you know, that whole narrative of, oh, you know, every day that I was a man, I was miserable and knew there was something wrong, that doesn't really chime with me. I had a blast in my 20s. I too met a man in an STI clinic. How is that? But who knew there was such a although I suppose it's people who like sex. So, I mean, you've got one thing in common, if nothing else.
Holly McNish, last but certainly not least, thank you very much for being here tonight. So take me back to the beginning of your writing journey then. When did you first start writing poetry?
Apparently when I was about 7, I think. I've always been quite obsessive about writing poems. I don't really know why. And when I was at uni, my mum sent me a poem that she'd written, what the fuck, on the bottom of it. And it was about the fact that I was so angry about my dad because he wouldn't let me have a cat. So I think it was very, very angry I was. So yeah, it hasn't really changed really. I've just been sort of rhyming about things that I'm angry about since I was like 7.
Okay.
So I've just always written. It always, if I haven't known what to say, like in things like this, when I just have to talk not in rhyme, I find it quite difficult. And I've always used poetry as just a way of getting things off my chest, or even writing revision notes and stuff. I wrote all my GCSE physics revision notes in poems, maybe.
That's quite a good way to remember.
It was great. I wish I could find them now. Loads of velocity equations. I could probably sell it to an educational charity.
I mean, fast forward a few years, and then YouTube was such a kind of breakthrough platform for you. Your poems kind of were widely shared, went viral. Do you think that the digital culture and the internet has brought poetry to new audiences and perhaps kind of changed poetry itself a little bit, or certainly the poetry scene?
I hope so. I think so. I think it's made people like more interested in the spoken side of poetry again, which is brilliant, I think, because that's kind of how it started. Like there seems to be a big, I don't know, maybe kind of debate between the page poetry and spoken poetry, but I think it's a load of rubbish, really, because we started off telling stories, didn't we, mouth to mouth, and telling poetry like that and singing songs, and yeah, I think it's great. I'm sort of in two minds about YouTube, but I'm mainly a very adamant supporter of it.
It's democratic.
Sort of silly thing
it's
to
easy
say
to
here,
get
but
it
people
out
that
there.
can't pay to come to an event, or people that can't get a lift into town with their parents, or personally, I was too scared to go into, like there's a poetry cafe in London, that's the first place I read a poem out, and I was too scared to go into the door for like a year. I was studying in London 1 day a week, and I walked past the poetry cafe door in Covent Garden like 7 times before I went in. And then when I went in with my sort of poem in my hand, knew when this open mic was, I went and asked the person behind the bar if it was the place for the Poetry Unplugged, it was called. And just because she basically didn't take my hand and say, yes, that would be great if you came and read, I'll show you exactly where it is. And she just, you know, she was perfectly friendly, but she said, oh yeah, it's just down the stairs. I was like, oh, I've got to walk down the stairs. And I don't know what's behind that, like turning in the stairs, and I could walk out here to have lots of people looking at me. So I didn't go again for another year, I don't think, after that.
And was there, I mean, you're very honest about, you know, the realities of it.
Yeah.
What was it like, the experience of motherhood? I mean, is there something that you wish you'd known before you went into it, maybe? Or something that you were keen to share, like a truth you were keen to tell?
I think the one thing that I wish I could say to any person that's pregnant is that you have not done anything wrong by becoming pregnant. Because I thought the problems, I got sort of the problems wrong, I think. When I became pregnant, I sort of felt guilty all the time. And I felt a bit ashamed, and I felt like people would tell me I was too young, or they'd make comments that made me feel really horrible as a mother. And then when I had a baby, like no one told me that I'd feel quite lonely, probably, or or that I wouldn't feel blooming when I was you know, these sort of like, it was more the psychological stuff that I just, after I'd had my daughter, I remember I was pushing a pram for the first time and it felt so weird. And someone that day said, oh, you can't be a mother, you're not old enough to do this. I thought, like, why are you shaming people? Like, you're allowed to have a baby. So I wish that was probably the only thing I would say. I was sitting in Regent's Park earlier because I got here about 3 hours early because I'm always worried about being late. And I was sat in the park and about 50 mums pushed prams past me and they were all on their own and they were all just, with young babies, just staring into space. And I just thought, oh, it's shit, actually, isn't it? Like, a lot of it is crap. And I wish, like, just come and sit down. I was thinking, actually, today, I'd love to make a T-shirt to be like, just the baby and me today, like, feel free to talk to me. Or something. Because before I had a kid, I'd be like, oh, that must be so nice. You're, like, walking in the sunshine. But actually, you just want a friend sometimes, I think.
It's kind of linking back to what Bryony was saying, really. It's a similar kind of thing, just, being together, group, finding your tribe, finding the we. Thank you very, very much indeed to our wonderful panel of difference makers. And thank you to you guys for coming down, and thank you on Facebook Live for tuning in as well. Cheers. Thank you, Kat. More breaking glass. Marvellous.